Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Thanks for tuning in and taking the time to join us. Today I'm joined by Phil as usual and also Dan Pizzi, Senior Strategist at Blend. We brought in some extra muscle today to talk about a really interesting topic when it comes to modern B2B demand generation, which is SEO. It's something that I'm actually seeing dismissed more and more when it comes to demand generation strategies. And we think that could be a really big mistake, actually. So today we're going to be sharing some proven SEO strategies that will actually generate revenue for your business. And I know Phil and Dan have worked with a range of businesses from different industries and have seen huge revenue success by doing so. So yeah, it's great to have you both here to talk through this. How you doing today?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Nice to join you gents on the podcast. Sunny England today, so everyone's happy.
Yeah, good to be here as usual. I particularly like SEO, as you both know, because I'm a big fan of finding things that produce predictable and ideally repeatable results in marketing, and those things are fairly few and far between. But SEO, relatively speaking, is one of the most predictable things you can do as a B2B marketer in the right circumstances. So for that reason, it's something I really enjoy focusing on and talking about. So yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, brilliant. As we go along, as usual, please feel free to ask any questions you have by adding them into the comments section on LinkedIn. I think we have some really interesting thoughts and some quite unique thoughts, actually, when it comes to SEO. So yeah, do feel free to pick our brains on anything that we do discuss or anything we don't discuss, actually. So firstly, I think it'd probably be quite good to outline, why SEO is so important, but actually dispel all the myths that come with it, all of the excuses that marketers make for not doing SEO. Like, marketers don't want to do it because it takes too long, for example. Like, can we just dispel some of these things straight up?
Yeah.
Want to kick us off, Dan?
Yeah, of course. I think really there are two big reasons why people are scared of SEO. One of them being, as you just mentioned, time. A lot of people think it takes a very long time to start performing through SEO, and there's quicker wins, for example, PPC, which I'm sure we'll come to later. And I think the other main reason is complexity. I think a lot of people look at SEO as a massive, complex activity, which might be because of sometimes the way people talk about it, some of the reasons that go into the ranking factors. But yeah, I think those are the two main reasons. And I think Phil and us, we can dispel those very easily.
Time's a big factor. SEO is most certainly a long-term strategy, but I say that in a positive way, as in you can do it for a long time, and it can have long-lasting results, and it can continue to work for you, as opposed to things that are sort of flash in the pan or sort of done and dusted fairly quickly. But despite being a long-term strategy, the fact is that for lots of businesses there are quick wins available too with SEO, and so it is often dismissed, as you say, for a variety of reasons in demand generation sort of strategies, and time is a factor. But the reality is that for lots of businesses, there's still low-hanging fruit in terms of moving from the wrong search results to the right search results, which is just just needs a bit of technical SEO in some instances, or identifying what the right keywords are in the first place, and optimizing around those can produce an almost overnight impact, which you can then build on top of with the long-term part of the SEO strategy. So yes, it's going to take time. Yes, it requires commitment, but it's not necessarily the case that all the returns will take that time and commitment for you to see the benefit of them.
One thing I'm hearing more and more and seeing is search is on the decline, SEO is dying, like the rise of social, the rise of all of these other channels, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
I think we see... Sorry, Phil.
No, go on.
I think we see time and time again that that's disproven, but it is contextual. I think there is ways to use search and there is ways to use social. I'm a firm believer that social is better used at the start of a user journey, for example. People are there to educate themselves, not necessarily ready to buy. And I think SEO is a lot more about when people are ready to buy, which is sometimes why maybe it gets thrown away compared to something like social. In reality, again, we're seeing it when people are ready to buy. That's how important it is.
Yeah, I think anything that's discussed in social circles, particularly in social media circles, can very easily adopt a fatalist outlook, as in, SEO is in decline, therefore it's dead, therefore don't do it. And that's one of the reasons why, some marketers might dismiss it. It's going to take a long time to see any results. It's declining, if not dead. And the third one could be, others have already mastered it, so there's no opportunity, there's no way in. But that fatalistic outlook is, in many situations, misguided. Big trends, big industries, big channels, even while they're in decline, can still offer you huge returns. And I think most people would agree, when they look at it through a sort of more dispassionate eyes, that SEO is far from being dead. There's still tons and tons of search happening. There are still tons and tons of businesses succeeding with search. And so it's far from being something that no longer works at all. It's changing constantly. Its application, to business and in the buying journey has shifted, as Dan pointed out. And it's still possible to win, and all those things, I think, go against what the social sort of voice sometimes whips up, in people's minds and imaginations, particularly when they're trying to sell the next big thing, the next platform that they want people to adopt. But SEO is still going strong, and there's plenty of ways to reap rewards if it's a fit for your go-to-market. Let's be clear, that's an important point. But it's not done and dusted by any means, as we prove, weekly with our own efforts for Blend and for clients.
Yeah, just on that point, Phil, when you say if it's a fit for your go-to-market, what are you actually talking about when you say kind of make sure it's a fit first?
Yeah, it's I reckon this can be put more eloquently by Dan, but I'll try. And that's to say that not all buyers are using search during the sort of research part of the buying process. So if your buyers, once they've identified a problem, which might happen on social or in communities or in groups or just within their business, if they simply don't turn to search to conduct the next part of their purchase process, the research part, to find you or find your competitors, then SEO is likely not a very predictable way to produce the results you're looking for, and you might need to find different ways to get in front of your buyer. Truth is, most B2Bs have an opportunity in search and with SEO, but I can't say that it's all B2Bs have that opportunity.
I think to add to that point as well, I think the best example of that is when you're trying to move into an industry that doesn't necessarily have volume yet, or you're coining your own kind of term, then it's very difficult to use SEO as a channel because there is no one searching that term yet. And then there's a debate where it's, do you want to be the leader for that term once people start using it anyway, or do we just focus on another channel for now, for example, LinkedIn, to target our target audience?
Yeah, it's important to take a holistic view, understand your business and your buyer, because like you say, Dan, there might be terms. I would say most category creation is hard, right? Very, very hard. Most businesses, SMEs that want to scale probably feel like they either do or they don't have a search audience. And if they don't, it's probably slightly less likely that there's a new term that they or others are coining that will suddenly become attractive. But in industries and businesses where search is viable, your point about identifying terms that are going to become relevant, going to become high volume, and optimizing for them early is a very, very good SEO strategy. Indeed. And there are situations where that might apply to businesses that don't otherwise have much going for them in an SEO sense. But of course, search is a buyer behavior. And if your buyers aren't displaying that behavior, then you haven't got a lot of reason to invest your efforts and your energy there. You're better off looking at other things that might come under the banner of ABM or community or event-based, tactics and strategies.
Yeah, both good points. Okay, right. Let's get into the juiciness of this episode, which is really about, telling everyone how to really generate some revenue from SEO, right? So when it comes to SEO and the blend approach and methodology, what would you say are our kind of principles when it comes to that? Do you want to start us off, Dan, on that?
Yeah, of course. I think, as I kind of mentioned right at the start, I think people sometimes misunderstand SEO and content marketing in general. I think sometimes people think of SEO as it has to be top of the funnel keywords. It has to be broad keywords that you're targeting. Whereas I think what we deploy across our clients and also through our own strategy is bottom of the funnel keywords and middle of the funnel keywords as the priority. We would choose those way before even looking at informational, long tail or broader terms. And I think, again, missing out on high intent terms, that's the most important part of SEO. And that is the fundamental strategy for everything we do.
Yeah, agreed. SEO is a broad, set of activities, and there are lots of different opportunities within, but our approach is to focus it all towards the bottom of the funnel, because SEO is one of the ways, and in fact, I think one of the more predictable and reliable ways to control how easily you are found by your buyers for the terms they use to describe what you sell, and bring them into your world and take them on a journey into your pipeline. Now, that does touch on top of the funnel terms like content that's targeted at, long tail, low volume, top of the funnel terms as part of that strategy, but it's with a view to making sure that commercial intent, high volume, high competition, short tail keywords that you're optimizing for them and you're ranking for them, better over time. So it's an integrated approach where the ultimate goal is to be very, very highly placed for short commercial keywords that are essentially about bringing buyers onto your core website rather than your content to evaluate your product or offering.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now let's try and dig a bit deeper into that and what that actually means. Because obviously, Dan, like, you're doing this day in, day out, right, for numerous businesses, like numerous industries and everything like that. So you're probably almost the most in the weeds when it comes to like SEO and generating revenue through SEO at the moment. So if I was a new business working with you when it comes to SEO and my goal is to generate revenue through search, what are the steps that you would go through in order to basically get me there?
Yeah, so I think the fundamental first step, and this is not just the case with SEO, it's the case with most tactics and strategy in general, is essentially mapping out your buyer's journey and finding out where buyers are searching, what they're searching, and when they're searching. And I think that step often does get missed because people just go straight into keyword research. But to even start the keyword research, you need to know what buyers are searching and when they're searching. So I think that is the core fundamental first step. I think there are a few kind of next routes you can take after that. Something I find really useful is then starting on competitor research. I think SEMrush and Ahrefs, which are the biggest keyword tools, both have a tool called competitor gap analysis or keyword gap analysis, where essentially you can just very quickly plug your competitors in and find the low-hanging fruits. That gives you a nice start to see some of the keywords that you would want to start targeting, especially from a commercial aspect, but also from an informational aspect as well. And then I guess comes the research phase, the actual keyword research phase, which I'm sure you guys can dive a little bit more into.
Good points. I think it's really easy. We're lucky, being agency side, that we get to see so many different situations, challenges, data points. It keeps us, I think, sort of fresh and on our toes. Whereas I reckon in-house marketers can sometimes struggle to get that perspective, and it can become quite, you're so close to the subject that you can sometimes lose perspective and no longer see the wood for the trees, so to speak. which is why looking at the buyer, what journey do they take, what steps do they use, what terms do they search for, and looking at your competitors are both really good ways of sense checking your own internal perception, which will be guided by other stakeholders, guided by maybe owners and founders, except campaigns that you've done, etc. And we'll get onto it. But of course, one of the biggest mistakes in SEO that can be made is to use, internally coined buzzwords as opposed to, actual terms, words, and phrases that buyers use when you're optimizing your content. And those external sources of insight, your buyers and your competitors, are a great way to stay alert to and avoid those pitfalls when building your own keyword strategy and doing that keyword research.
Anything else to add to the keyword research phase, Dan? Is that covered or?
Yeah, no, I'll dive into the keyword research phase as well. So as we kind of mentioned before, I think the most important aspect when you're starting keyword research is to start looking at commercial keywords first. And I think this kind of plays into the fact that everyone thinks SEO is such a long-term play. Focusing on your commercial keywords is almost a short to medium-term play. What we find most effective is what pages do you have currently on your website? Look those up, get those all listed, then look at some of the keywords that could possibly map up to those using a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush, finding the volume, for example, having a look at what the actual search results are. I don't think a lot of people do that, even though that's such an underrated tactic to do, because if your competitors are ranking for that on Google, it's a term that could be relevant, not all the time, but usually would be relevant. And then once you've mapped up all those pages, you can see what you're currently ranking for, see which ones you need to optimize kind of soon, or which ones you need to optimize later, which maybe new pages you need on your website, for example, and other things like that. And I think once you then have those mapped keywords, then you can maybe start broadening your research to more informational terms as well and start looking at content a little bit more.
Couple of questions on the keyword front. Should businesses only care about high volume keywords? Like, what if their commercial keyword, even if it's super high intent, have, zero or very little volume? Should they still be targeting that commercial keyword, or should they go after something else instead?
I think we all agree on intent over volume. I think in B2B especially, if you have, for example, a 20 search volume keyword, that's the highest intent possible. People are searching for it and they're going to buy your services if you're number one. Then you want to rank over that than kind of a broad keyword that maybe you're not sure if people are searching for a definition or they're searching for a service, for example. So yeah, I think in answer to that, always pick high intent over high volume.
Yeah, there's a lot of application for a lot of room for common sense in SEO. You've got to make judgment calls occasionally, this term over this term. But I think, like, if you've got to contort yourself, or you've got to contort the way you communicate about what you offer to fit the needs of a high volume search term over a low volume search term, then you're probably making a mistake, because the low volume one probably offers you the highest relevance and the most attractive traffic that has the intent to purchase what it describes. And, as a business, you have to make a decision about whether winning a portion of that search traffic and that potential business is more valuable than this other thing that might require you to pretend to be something you're not. You might rank worse for it, and you might not actually get conversions off the back of it. And again, going back to that, the goal here is to get buyers to convert, high intent conversions, pipeline, and revenue. If a high volume search term doesn't generate conversions, then it's for naught, and you would be better off going after a lower volume one that's a better fit for your offering.
Another question on the commercial keyword front. How do you actually go about finding those exact commercial keywords? Like, how do you know if something is commercial? But I'm hearing a lot, like, commercial keywords are important, right? They are the bread and butter of SEO when it comes to generating revenue, but how do you actually find them?
So I think luckily in B2B, it's probably a lot easier than in B2C, because there are usually a few suffixes that will indicate whether they're a commercial keyword or not. For example, software usually someone searching for it to purchase or look into a software. Or if you're searching for a service, for example, then usually someone looking at buying a service or researching a service. Solution is another one of those suffixes that you would usually see in commercial keywords. There are some keywords that don't have a suffix, but those are the ones that you really need to look into a little bit more, especially at what's ranking, where the results are, and what Google's kind of ranking for those keywords, because that can sometimes be a confusion of what you think a commercial keyword might be and what Google actually ranks for that.
Yeah, some terms that you'll research will be black and white. It's clearly commercial, it's clearly informational. There is a bit of a gray area where you've got to sort of use a bit of common sense, a bit of judgment. And there are areas where when you go and look at the Google results, it's actually ranking the opposite kind of content to the one that you think the keyword relates to. So you've got to look at all these different sources of information to build as clear a picture as you can, but it's always evolving, it's always shifting, and you can't necessarily be 100% correct in every choice you make. But if you know your industry, you know your business, you know buyers, then you can probably build a good picture and identify commercial keywords, or very likely to be commercial keywords, that if you optimize for, will get you found by buyers who are in that stage of the purchase process.
What about, sorry, another question on commercial keywords. What about highly competitive commercial keywords that have been around for ages? Like, let's say you're a new startup in like the CRM world, or like the project management software world, like tools that have been around for forever, like since the internet started, right? Like, what do you do in that case? Because it's got to be hard to rank for those commercial keywords, right?
I think it's something that we're seeing more and more, especially with software keywords. What you'll find ranking in the top 10, you'll find at least 3 or 4 listing sites. So I think even in that itself, there's an argument to be made that why even prioritize SEO for that keyword? Maybe you should be prioritizing those listing sites over the keyword in general, because it's going to be very difficult to rank over a Gartner or a Capterra, for example. So I think there is some like intuition to make around whether you go for a keyword or not, based on, for example, its difficulty, the kind of websites that are ranking for it. Are they relevant to your industry? Are they just massive sites like Wikipedia, where they're going to be very difficult to rank over? But if they aren't, then it's always a sign to go for them.
Yeah, it's probably in some ways a sound strategic choice to go after lower volume keywords or slightly lower volume keywords if you can, because of the increased likelihood that you can have success there initially anyway. Once you're mature and very successful in SEO, then more things become possible. But something that I've noticed is that to some degree, on very high volume, keywords that have been around for a long time, like you said, Dan, I see some of the predictability of SEO kind of breaking down around those terms as well. As in the things that work pretty reliably throughout the rest of the sort of work that we do don't necessarily hold true in those spaces where it's incredibly competitive. There are brands that have been there for decades and people have been searching for that term for a long time. So I feel like the aspects of SEO that I really like, which is the repeatable results, don't necessarily show up as predictably there as they do in lower volume opportunities, newer industries, niche terms, and so on. So I think it's a good idea to sort of treat those with a little bit of caution, especially if there are smaller opportunities that you can go after quicker, better, and be more successful.
I think it goes back to the long-term versus short-term aspect of SEO as well. If you do want to rank for harder difficulty keywords, then you need to have a full content strategy where you're constantly producing content around those topics, rather than just saying, well, I'm going to produce one piece of content that ranks for this keyword, and then we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, you're very unlikely to rank for any competitive keyword if you don't have clusters of content coming behind to support you in terms of internal linking, relevance, a degree of organic backlinking, maybe some less organic backlinking. Without those things, you're going to struggle. But even with those things, you know, I've seen some less than predictable outcomes and results around really high competition. Whereas in the mid-range, yeah, you can, you know, you can find a target, you can put together the plan, produce the content, and see a pretty predictable improvement in your position for it, or appearance in those search results, which is what I love seeing.
On that point, you both just mentioned clusters and topic clusters. Nikolai, thanks for. Oh, Dan is absolutely covered up now. You know what? I'll cover up myself. There we go. So now you're on screen. Nobody needs to see my face. This is an interesting question, and thanks for coming back, Nikolai. I recognize the name, so good to have you here. Yeah, interesting one around content clusters. So let me just read out this full question. It's quite a long one. Top of funnel educational content, as in what is search terms, has very high competition in search results. And it seems like Google is taking over the top of the funnel searches anyway, offering no-click answers. So question for both of you, is there any point in making educational topic cluster content anymore? Should it all be middle to bottom funnel content? And what kind of content do you use to meet those search terms? Great question. Thanks, Nikolai. I'll leave it up.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, there's all sorts of different situations that you can find yourself in search. No two businesses are the same, and no two businesses' SEO opportunities or challenges are the same. So what is content in some fields will be very competitive, and in others it's not. I like content that's aimed at that very early educational stage, sort of type of buyer, because I'm of the view a lot of businesses will say, and they've told us in the past, that they don't want to create that kind of content because their buyers are way past that point. Our customers all know this already. We'll look foolish if we create that kind of content. My view is, one, we all need a constant flow of content ideas, and this is relatively easy content to ideate and brief and create. But second, there are new buyers coming into every industry all the time, every day. And I, for one, would rather be the brand that educates, you know, informs and shapes or colors those people's perceptions of my category than leaving it to someone else. So almost regardless of competitiveness, I'm in favor of having at least part of your content strategy cover off nice, easy to write, educational content that in many cases you can rank highly for, even despite what search tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs tell you, because that data is not, you know, without fault, right? There are times when it shows completely different results to what you actually sort of anticipate when you look at the search results. So in essence, top of the funnel is still good. I think it's great for businesses to write it, and I'm a fan of it. Probably a separate question and a separate answer to the next part of the question. But first, I want to see if Dan wants to add anything to my point about that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Phil. And I also feel Nikolai's pain, because Google is very difficult to predict. And the more and more kind of featured snippets is giving for what is, the less likely you're going to get clicks to your website. It's just the way it's working at the moment. People are getting their quick definition and probably leaving Google completely. So I do feel the pain there. But I also agree with Phil. I think there is a time and a place, and there's different industry, the way it kind of works differently across every single search, to be honest. I also think when you're looking at content clusters, it's important to marry the very awareness-based keywords, like the what is keywords or the how keywords, with pain points. And that fits into the content cluster model quite well, both being awareness and consideration, sometimes content. And I think also very, very worth looking at other types of awareness content. For example, people love versus content. If you're kind of ranking for those kind of pieces, maybe they'll be a little bit more valuable than what is. But yeah, I think there's different ways to go about it. We're seeing more and more, for example, what is now put into commercial pages, solution pages, because people seem to rank very well on the featured snippet for what is. So people are just now stuffing it into commercial pages.
Yeah, that's
FAQs as well.
Yeah, putting that what is content at the top of a commercial product page is a bit of a Yeah, I'm unsure where I stand on that from a user experience point of view versus an SEO point of view, but nevertheless, it's being successful in some places. Another point about 0 clicks on Google is, I think even 0 click results confer some trust and relevance to the brand that provided the content that's in that 0 click result. I think, as a B2B user of search, it's very rare that I don't notice who provided the response in a 0 click result. If it's a featured snippet, if it's I'm always on the lookout for where that origin is, even if I don't get there ultimately. And Google would probably say the same, that, those search results can't exist without brands publishing their content. So you've got to be in it to win it to a degree. The other thing to remember is, of course, that for every article that's published is an opportunity to create stronger, deeper internal linking structure within your own site. So there's still a benefit, there's still an advantage. Even if you're going to appear further down the first page of results, you're not going to get as many clicks as the top result, or the 0 click result will get impressions. You're still getting something back from that and creating that opportunity to have quality internal linking within your site. Middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel, I think, is becoming a bit of a blurred concept in my mind, because ultimately buyers don't separate their research process into neat buckets where they say, right, today I'm going to look for middle of the funnel content. I think there's basically education, informational intent, and commercial. And when most people say middle of the funnel content, they tend to, I think, I'm open to being corrected, but I think they tend to think of case studies versus pricing, feature lists and things, stuff that's, trust building, but not quite conversion creating and so on. And that for me is website content first and foremost, whereas clusters are, article content, pillar content for SEO and educational purposes. So that's the way I think about content these days, a bit more.
Anything to add on that point, Dan? Or
is there such a thing as a middle of the funnel search term?
Well, I think, for example, a versus article is a good example of that, because it isn't necessarily fit into the bucket of traditional website content like cost calculator or case study, for example. I think that could arguably be a blog piece of content, for example. And I think almost when you look at content clusters now, you're mixing in those different aspects, because if you're making a content cluster, for example, on demand generation, you may not necessarily just want to include your traditional blogs in there. As you mentioned, you really want to link everything together. So you need to think about everything within that topic on your website, arguably even the solution page, which isn't your pillar, obviously, but eventually you want people to be going from your pillar to that solution page.
Yeah. Middle of the funnel might also be more of a sort of lead gen concept than a demand gen concept. I really tend to think about like narrow and then broad informational terms, and then narrow and then broad commercial terms as being the sort of the most important things to try and hit with content, because they cover the needs of your business from an SEO point of view. They give shape to your SEO, to your content strategy, and they cover the buying journey as well, the part of the buying journey that happens on your website and on search. Ultimately, we're not advocates of lead nurturing, of scoring, of sending email to leads, or even generating leads in the first place, which I think is quite synonymous with middle of the funnel in some ways. So I guess our opinions have evolved and shifted a little bit over the last couple of years.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully that answered your question, Nikolai, but feel free to ask a follow-up if you have any other questions. But let's get back on track, because I think there's quite a lot else to get through in terms of our kind of steps for actually generating revenue through SEO. So we were talking about commercial keywords, kind of what they are, how to find them, what you should do with them. So what was the next step after that? If you can remember, Dan.
We went quite deep into that, didn't we? Now we're completely off piste.
Who wants to get back on track?
Yeah, in terms of the research stage, Once you've obviously mapped those keywords, it's then about optimizing on page, off page, technical maybe. Really, once you've done that optimization, there's only a few points of optimization you can really make. For example, updating your H1 maybe to include the keyword, updating your metadata, adding keyword into the copy where possible, but not adding it too much, updating alt text, those types of things. But once you've done all of that, then it's about how do we build authority on the subject, as kind of Phil mentioned, through things like content clusters. And I think the most important aspect for me, and you guys might disagree here, but I find the most important aspect is content auditing. A lot of the time, you'll see websites that have so much content that some of it might be SEO focused and it might have meant to be SEO focused, but it might have been forgotten about over time. Some of it might be new content that isn't necessarily written for SEO, but it accidentally ranks, which you see quite a lot. And some of it might just be kind of out of date content. But it's very important to get that data into some sort of spreadsheet or something else. You can use another tool and then start to review that data, see what is getting the most traffic at the moment and look at that over a year, because you really want to see what the trends are looking like. And then mapping that data now to keywords, for example. Is there a blog that ranks very, very well? Or is there a blog that used to rank well and maybe you need to improve it a little bit, for example? By doing that content auditing, you're then finding the quickest wins, I think, in SEO.
Yeah. You definitely want to make the most of what you've already got, right? You've made the investment in creating it. So, no sense in letting it languish. And as you say, there are plenty of brands and websites where content's been created for a long time in some cases, but all focused on that top of the funnel. This is an interesting blog, let's write it. It may or may not rank. Further to that, it's not unusual. In fact, it's very common to find where brands have got a lot of, or they've got blog content, it's very often not internally linked at all, meaning there aren't signals being passed up to commercial website pages, or they're not organized in clusters around pillars. I use that word with hesitation, because they're not organized in clusters around central pieces of content. And even if they are, those central pieces of content are entirely gated pieces of content that aren't really benefiting or giving any SEO benefit, despite being at the center of a cluster. So there's like 3 opportunities, at least more really, to take existing content and improve its performance for you, to improve its effectiveness. And so that's always worth looking at to see if it's an opportunity.
I think another aspect to add to that as well is we're seeing more and more Google is favoring new content, fresh content, trustworthy content. We know EAT is one of the big models Google's trying to prioritize at the moment. And essentially, you need to be making sure that your content is up to date and you're not just languishing really old, out of date, untrustworthy content on your website. Otherwise, you could get penalized.
Yeah. I just want to dig into your point, Phil, on internal linking, because I think you've spoken about this before numerous times, the importance of internal linking when it comes to ensuring your blogs and your kind of top of funnel content are supporting your commercial keywords. So can you just go to town a minute on internal linking and the importance of it? Internal
linking are like the little backlinks that you can control, that individually they don't have nearly the impact that a backlink could have from an authoritative brand, although we all know how hard those have become to obtain. But internal links you can fully control. You can create them yourself. You can create hundreds of them yourself, and we've seen them have an incredible impact on where the pieces of content that they pass relevance to rank for their target keywords. So taking articles and finding words and phrases in them that you can link to both informational pillar pages and commercial website pages is a really, really important or very powerful way to maximize the impact of your content strategy. Somewhere along the line, somehow, we all got convinced, I think, that it was dangerous to use exact match linking. Really something to steer clear of. You must use a phrase or a semantic version of, or anything but the exact word that you want to optimize for. But in reality, I think, well, I've seen the results. The opposite is almost true. Nearly every business that we've worked with can benefit from using exact match linking from blog content to pillar pages and commercial pages for the keywords that they want to be found for. And I've seen with my own eyes just how big an impact that can have on their position for those keywords. People listening, watching, or reading on this topic will probably be quite quick to say, but Google tells us not to stuff keywords and that there's a penalty that we could run into out there. But I argue that most of us are so far away from running into that kind of penalty that we've got nothing to worry about at all. 2 or 3 exact match internal links in a blog post is not going to result in you being penalized by Google, but it is much more effective than either linking using vague sounds like phrases up to your key pillar pages and commercial pages, or linking sideways only to other blog articles that you've written on the topic. Those are useful links for readers, but they don't do much for your SEO because they're not pointing up to your commercial pages, which are going to get buyers onto your site where they can convert into pipeline. So internal linking, vitally important. A mixture of exact match and non-exact match, important. Exact match, which most people won't do because of fear of penalty, is really important to do. And it can have a phenomenal impact on where you rank for even some quite competitive phrases. And we've seen it many times.
Great stuff. All right. What is... Oh, go on.
Well, I think we ought to just go on the record on one other point, unless this is going to come up, which is we talked about internal linking, we talked about clusters, and we talked about it being not unusual to find that if clusters exist, it's gated content at the center. For the most part, there's no good reason to create gated content in 2024. I can't find a good justification to go to the effort to create high quality, comprehensive content, hide it from your buyers, put a gate on it, generate leads that you will struggle to close at any kind of attractive rate. We've talked about this before, about under the demand generation, header. We've talked about split funnel analysis, showing you just how different the sources of pipeline are between, high declared intent and ebook download leads and so on. Gated content is just not the play if you want to improve your SEO and generate pipeline from your SEO and generate revenue from your content, full stop, because leads that download your content by filling in forms and gates are not going to close into customers at any kind of acceptable rate these days.
And I think if you're trying to justify ungating to a possible superior, for example, doing a content audit is a good way to justify that, because you can then start to actually break down the metrics of it only had this many views, likely a low number because it's gated. It's very difficult to find through a channel like SEO, and it has a low conversion rate. Then it's an obvious kind of reason why you need to ungate it, and one people might buy into as well.
Yeah, I suppose even if you're stuck in that lead generation model, if you're kind of saying, well, look, it's had 5 downloads this month. Do we really need those 5 leads? We can get those somewhere else. We're not advocating to get those somewhere else. Absolutely not. But if you absolutely have to, say we don't need those, let's ungate it and actually have a few hundred people consume our content.
Yeah, rank with it and be seen by potentially 10 times, 100 times, the number of people. Definitely the way to go.
Cool. All right. Where were we? What's next on the?
Well, we talked. Yeah, so we were just talking about have a strategy, have a plan, optimize your website, and audit your existing content to make it work as hard as possible for you. Which brings us on to new content creation.
Yes, new content creation. So, yeah, looking at the audit, I think that's actually a good way to identify what you need to create, what kind of content you need to create. Same as the commercial keyword research. If you find a topic is very difficult, for example, or you find that you're not ranking that well for this topic and you really want to be ranking in the top 3 or number 1, for example, then you kind of immediately know what cluster you need to start looking at. And that would be your most valuable cluster, essentially. When you actually go to plan content, again, it's different from this commercial keyword research, because you are now looking at, a lot of the time, awareness, informational content and keywords. It's a different kind of research process, but again, you use the same tools. It's worth looking at competitors again, but a lot of the time you can just do a very broad search and then start to tighten it a little bit by looking at like what ranks for a broader search, how many keywords rank for it, what blogs work here, just what's working, essentially. And I think it's also worth saying at that point, a lot of people, when they're looking at planning new content, are like, well, we need to do 8 blogs within a content cluster. I think what you're seeing more and more, and what Google's actually ranking more and more, is multimedia. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen so many YouTube videos ranking on Google recently. I've seen so many FAQs and forums ranking recently as well for niche questions. So I think that's also important to note as well when you're planning content.
Yeah, we've certainly observed and seen some success with a similar approach, which is written content still has a very, important role to play and a very, predictable impact, usually speaking, but video in particular, as well as other formats, is becoming, very powerful too. Search results are diversifying. The things that you see at the top of page 1 of the search results is more varied now than it ever was. And YouTube quite often features very prominently. And, experiments, led by Dan, shown us that if you, with the right kind of content, you can rank with video. If you put video in your written content, you can rank better as a result, or at least we think that's what we're seeing. And so multimedia approach is definitely advocated for. And of course, there are applications for that media outside of SEO as well, which is another benefit and another win. But you're no longer limited to the written word only as a sound approach.
Question on the amount of content that should be created. I don't know where this came from, but there was always this thing and this thought that you have to create 1 blog a week, or like, I don't know where that came from, right? But how much new content do you actually need to create?
That was a HubSpot study back in, I think, 2014. I think that, or maybe it was 2016. No, I think it was 2014.
Almost 10 years ago, though.
that basically showed that on average, they plotted content creation rate against traffic acquisition rate or some other metric. And it showed with some degree of consistency that businesses that blogged that frequently grew their traffic X% more than people who blogged only twice a month, and the curve predictably did that. If you blog 32 times a month, then you grew traffic and leads at that time much faster. But there was a kind of, not an inflection point, but a point at which the gain started to exceed the effort, so to speak. So 4 blogs a month, a blog a week, very convenient, became this kind of like focal point. And it also, I think, was just a really good fit with people's capability. If you've got a small marketing team or a marketing manager at an SME who HubSpot were targeting at that time, they're probably not capable of much more than 1 a week, in addition to everything else they're doing. So it just fit. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy that you had to blog once a week in order to succeed with blogging. That doesn't answer your question, but it explains where the stat came from.
But what now?
I think my thought on that is there really isn't one answer to that. It obviously depends on the size of your business, depends on your priorities, depends on how many marketers you have. But what is important is that you're producing high quality content over volumes of content. You need to make sure Google will rank it rather than just producing 3 pieces of content because you can.
I've not seen anything to suggest that it's no longer true that if you produce more content aligned to the right strategy and of the right quality, you'll get more results. I think you still will, but those limitations of strategy, of planning, of production, etc., tend to throttle this aspect of most people's marketing strategies. There are a few brands out there, HubSpot's one of them. I can think of a couple of others that, you know, have taken blogging to extremes, one a day, multiple blogs a day, you know, and they have seen massive increases in traffic. And massive increases in traffic don't necessarily guarantee massive increases in pipeline, but they also don't necessarily work against it. That usually there is a connection or a correlation between those two things. So produce as much good quality content as you can, aligned to a strategy, is probably what the advice should be.
Yeah, but like Dan said, like, is the advice more? It's more important to focus on quality rather than quantity of output. Like, there's no point in just churning out blog after blog after blog that they're really poor quality.
Yeah, definitely.
Or you could focus that time on creating a high quality pillar page. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I say quality is a throttling factor, because if in order to increase quantity you've got to sacrifice quality, then probably advise against it. But if you can deliver both at the same time consistently, then we'd be mad to say don't do it.
Yeah, cool. Nikolai's back with another great question here. I don't know if this is a bit technical, actually. It might be. What's a good strategy to minimize the time between publishing and ranking, both for a website that's been around a while and for one starting from scratch? Who wants to give Nikolai a bit of advice on this?
Well, I'm just pondering that. It's a really interesting question.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Like, in gaming circles, I think the phrase is "get good," and it's as in, ultimately, the better your content strategy, the longer you've been doing it, the better your SEO, the quicker you'll rank for highly competitive terms. Blend itself is in a very fortuitous position these days, where if we identify a keyword we want to rank for and we create a quality piece of content and publish it, it's normally only a day or two before it's ranking there, and often faster. But that's a product of all the work that's gone in before. Years and years of work to create a quality SEO reputation in Google's eyes. So I suppose the best strategy is to create that reputation in Google's eyes. Only create content that's relevant, only create content that's quality, educational, optimize it well, and you'll rank as quick as you possibly can. There may be some technical factors, but I tend to think of most technical SEO as kind of like table stakes these days. If there's anything wrong with your technical SEO that's making you that's stopping you from ranking, then it's going to stop you from ranking. You need to fix it. And it's not as nuanced a topic as it used to be. I don't think it's not like a new piece of content is going to reveal a new technical problem that you can then fix and then rank, if you see what I mean. It's technical SEO is either good or bad in most cases. So I think it's a product of the time and the strategy that's gone before is the best, if not the only sort of way that you can impact the speed of your rank, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree 100% with you, Phil. The more authoritative you are, the more likely you are to get ranked quicker.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, I think also there are some ways to give Google signals. For example, like you mentioned before, internal linking. That could be a good way to give Google signals that that's the page it needs to rank for that keyword. I think otherwise, Google is just random sometimes. It can be completely random when it chooses to pick your article. A lot of the time when you first publish content, you will literally see dips like that up and down. So it is difficult to predict, but you can try and give it as much signals as possible.
I wanted to say, of course, your sitemap, XML sitemap needs to work. But again, that's kind of like the sort of thing that is either working or isn't. It's rarely a kind of like continuously tweak it. And I think I'm right in saying, Dan, that these days when we publish an article that we want to rank for a term, it's hours or at most days before we see ourselves in the search results, and usually pretty close to the position we want to be in, right?
Yeah. I didn't know what Dan you were asking. This is quite confusing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you and I work on content for Blend more so, and I think the same is true for our clients, right? It's unusual to publish a piece of content and wait any more than a day, really, or maybe two, to at least find yourself in the search results. You might not be in your final position. That might take a little bit longer to reach. But yeah, if you've if you're seeing a very long delay, then that's potentially something to investigate. But if you've been doing it for time and you've got a good approach and you do quality content, which I'm sure you do, then I would hope it'd be really quick.
So he's asked a follow-up. Nikolai's just
getting on this show, aren't we?
Yeah, we should actually. This is a really interesting one, and I'm annoyed at myself for not thinking of this beforehand. So thank you, Nikolai, for asking this question. Do paid search ads help shortcut the process at all? So just to clarify that question, basically asking, can you pay to rank for the same keywords in order to boost the organic ranking of the page for that keyword?
So are you saying does paid impact organic in terms of search
I
position?
think that's what this is asking. Yeah.
I think he means can you use paid ads as a replacement in the short term?
Both are valid questions. Let's answer both.
Let's tackle it both ways. Or does it shortcut the ranking process?
Yeah. It's a can of worms, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, search ads are, without question, a way to pay to appear at the top of any search term you like. You know, the cost will vary because the competition will vary and the quality of the competition will vary, but there's no denying that you can pay to be in position 1, 2, or 3. Being in position 1, 2, or 3 in B2B, sadly, doesn't necessarily equal the same result as being position 1, 2, or 3 organically. Only a fraction of clicks go on search results, on paid search results versus organic search results. Conversion rate from paid clicks tends to be lower. Conversion rate to pipeline and closed won tends to be very much lower from paid, especially in the less transactional B2B spaces in which we operate. You know, to some degree, there's no good reason for that. They're both results on the same page, but buyer intent, buyer behavior post-click seems to be night and day different. You know, a savvy buyer that's genuinely interested in your product, it seems, is more likely to scroll down past even your own ad to try to find your organic result. I think out of respect for your budget more than anything else. You know, so it's like you can't turn paid clicks into pipeline the same way you can turn organic clicks. That's just fact. So even though paid is a way to shortcut the process of appearing there, it's not a way to shortcut the results of appearing there. So that's one version of that fact. Now, I don't believe that paid search impacts your position. I don't think it's a ranking signal, secret or otherwise, but I'm ready to be corrected.
No, yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a ranking factor. I don't think it makes a difference in organic. I think it's just another placement essentially in the search results. And like you said, Phil, sometimes it's less trustworthy, but I also think in other cases it is a good play if you can attribute it well to pipeline, which Google Ads is actually quite easy to do because it's very easy to track Google Ads in comparison to organic search. It is a good play sometimes, but again, like we said at the start, Google Ads is even more important to be hyper targeted at your most important, valuable commercial keywords. You want to make sure that you're not paying for anything that wouldn't necessarily lead to a purchase almost that far down the funnel.
That is exactly the point that I was going to make, actually.
Yes.
There is no way on this planet Earth I would ever pay for a top of funnel keyword like in Google. Not only would the volume would be large, right? But that just means that the actual cost of that click would be astronomical and it's not close enough to your pipeline and revenue to have a consistent measurable return on that. And yeah, poor way to think about it. We actually spoke in depth on paid ads and the potential downfalls of PPC in our last episode. So I would say go and check that out because we did go to town on like the realistic ROI from paid search.
Actually, I've got a question for you, Dan Pizzi, which is you did a very good thing there, which is you represented a bit of a foil to my point, which was to say that there are ways and places where paid is effective. Agreed. That's what we said last week. Have you noticed is there a difference between what, in an effective program, is there a difference between what you target with paid versus what the brand can rank for organically, or is there overlap and correlation between those two things?
I think there's similarities and differences. I think you can cover more sometimes in paid because essentially you are picking the keywords, all of them that you want to try and rank for. Whereas sometimes you can find it difficult in organic to rank for those slightly different variants. So I think in that sense, there's arguably a slight difference. But I think very, very similar in terms of like you want to be ranking for commercial keywords. I also think the difference a lot of the time where you want to prioritize organic and not do paid at all depends on the type of business you are in B2B. I think if you're a service-based business, less and less you're likely to use paid because people's buying journeys are so long. Whereas if you're a solution-based business, software-based business, it could be worth testing and tracking and seeing if you do get results.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly what we see, isn't it? And you've said it absolutely hit the nail on the head. Be hyper-focused and be testing. Because it isn't a guaranteed solution to pipeline problems, but it can help in certain situations. So yeah, that's good advice. Interesting.
Yeah, really great question. Thanks for that. Okay, was there anything else to cover off in terms of our steps in creating, an SEO strategy aligned to revenue? I think we pretty much covered everything, right? We got to the creation of new content, which was, kind of the last thing. You're fueling everything with that. Yeah.
No, I think we covered most of it. Even the point about the sort of early stage, top of the funnel, what is type content. It's a very effective, reliable strategy for many. So yeah, still got a lot of legs, and is not one to be dismissed just yet, I don't think.
No, it's that old reliable racehorse that you roll out every year. The odds are getting worse and worse, but they just deliver.
There's an interesting thing as well. I mean, that my attention was drawn yesterday on a LinkedIn conversation about the fact that quite often in surveys, marketers are asked their opinion about what's most effective, what's driving the most, success, revenue, leads, pipeline, etc. But opinion isn't data. And quite often conclusions within marketing surveys are drawn from responses, and they're opinion-based responses. Whereas we would urge all businesses to look at their data and identify what sources of intent, what channels, what mediums are producing the real results, the closed won revenue, in the pipeline, so to speak, and use that data to inform their strategy. And I reckon, SEO content creation gets kind of downgraded in opinion-based surveys versus more trendy topics like social, which is very good, and ABM and other things. But data is the key. Got to look at your own data and see what's working for you.
Yeah, good closing point. Any kind of last thoughts or words of wisdom, Dan?
One last thought. AI is not taking over search yet.
Yeah, we said, didn't we, that like this conversation couldn't be had without having AI in our minds. AI could change everything. Could change the way people search, could change whether people search at all. Hasn't yet. And I think we also said that for the most part, as good as we can know now, or as good as the people that are expert and really focused in this area can know now, optimizing for AI looks a lot like optimizing for SEO. Good quality educational content, well produced, well linked, well optimized, on the right terms, a good authority for your brand and so on. There appears to be a lot of similarity for now between what we think it will take to be found in an AI version of search, but we're not there yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
So that's probably a topic for another day.
Yeah. All right. I'll add it to the list of topics to AI in search. Cool. Got it. Right. Okay. Let's wrap things up there. That was really great. Really useful. I learned some things in there. So yeah, good stuff. Thanks guys for joining on that one. So
No worries.
yeah, let's wrap it up. Obviously you can listen or watch or stream any other episode on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, basically anywhere. Just search for Demand Decoded. You'll find it, and we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.
Bye everybody.
Bye.